The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber opened with a deep rumbling sound that made the floor shake under Jiwan's feet. She walked slowly into the huge circular room that could hold thousands of beings. The ceiling stretched so high above that it disappeared into darkness. Stars twinkled through the transparent dome overhead, making the whole place feel like they were floating in space. Itself, Ambassador Jiwan had been to this chamber many times before, but today felt different. The air buzzed with tension and whispered conversations in languages she did not understand. 47 different alien species had sent their representatives here. All of them were talking about the same thing, humanity. She looked around at the other beings in the room. The Thylex were tall, crystalline creatures that looked like walking diamonds. Their bodies caught the light and threw rainbow patterns on the walls. The Morphins were small, furry beings with 6 arms who never stopped moving. The Zentari floated in the air inside clear bubbles filled with purple gas. Each species was so different from humans that sometimes Jiwan wondered how they ever managed to work together at all. But work together they did. The Galactic Council had kept peace in this part of the galaxy for over 10,000 years. They had rules for everything, where species could build colonies, how much trade was allowed between worlds, what technology could be shared, and what had to stay secret. The Council decided everything, and everyone followed their decisions. Everyone except humans. Lately, Jiwan walked to the human section where 2 other people waited for her. Commander Minho stood straight and tall in his dark blue uniform. His hands were clasped behind his back, but she could see the muscles in his jaw working. He was angry and trying not to show it. Minho had spent 20 years in the human space fleet watching Council ships tell human vessels where they could and could not go. Next to him sat Dr. Heron, the smartest person Jiwan had ever met. Heron had discovered new ways to grow food in space and create energy from starlight. But every time she tried to share her discoveries, the Council told her to wait for approval that never came, because the Council did not want humans to become too advanced too quickly. The 3 humans took their seats at a small table in the section marked for Earth. There were only 3 chairs. Even though humans now lived on over 200 worlds, they were still considered a minor species. The Thylex had an entire section with 50 chairs. The Morphins had 30. The humans got 3A. Loud chime rang through the chamber, and all conversation stopped. Speaker Thylex rose from his position at the center of the room. His crystalline body was twice as tall as any human, and when he spoke, his voice came from everywhere. At once, citizens of the galaxy, he began. We gathered today to address a serious problem. The human species has been acting without proper authority. Jiwan felt her heart start beating faster. She knew this day would come. For months, human colonies had been ignoring Council rules. They had built new settlements without asking permission. They had traded with species the Council said were dangerous. They had explored regions of space that were supposed to be off limits. Your colonies expand beyond approved boundaries. Thylex continued, his voice getting louder. Human ships travel through restricted space zones. Human traders make deals without Council oversight. This cannot continue. The speaker turned his attention directly to the human table. Ambassador Jiwan, your species has been part of our Council for 300 years. We welcomed you when you were still trapped on a single world. We taught you how to travel between stars. We shared our knowledge of other species. We protected you from the dangers of the galaxy. Jiwan stood up slowly. Every eye in the chamber focused on her. She could feel the weight of their attention like a physical thing pressing down on her shoulders. For 3 centuries, humans had been the youngest members of the Council, always asking for permission, always following rules made by beings who had been traveling space since before humans discovered fire. We are grateful for everything the Council has done for us, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the vast room. But we are no longer children who need constant guidance. A ripple of shocked whispers ran through the chamber. No species had ever spoken to the Council like that. Respect for the ancient civilizations was built into every law, every tradition, every way of doing things. You are still children, Thylex replied, his voice sharp like breaking glass. Your species has existed for barely a moment compared to ours. You know nothing of the true dangers that exist in the galaxy. You know nothing of the delicate balance we maintain. The balance you speak of keeps us locked in place, Jiwan said, feeling her own anger start to rise. We asked to explore new regions, and you say no. We asked to trade freely, and you say no. We ask to share our discoveries and you say wait for approval that never comes. You do not guide us, you control us, the chamber erupted. In alien voices, species that had never heard anyone challenge the council were shocked. Some seemed angry, others seemed curious. The Morphins chattered rapidly among themselves, while the Zentari floated higher in their bubbles to get a better view order. Thylex commanded, and the room fell silent again. You will accept new restrictions, no more expansion beyond designated zones. No more independent trade agreements, no more research projects without council approval. You will submit all human activities. To our oversight commander, Minho stood up next to Juwan. His military training showed in every line of his body. His voice was steady, but everyone could hear the steel underneath. And if we refuse, then you will learn why the council has maintained peace for 10,000 years. Thylex replied the threat was clear: obey or face the consequences. Dr. Heron rose slowly from her chair. She was smaller than the other two humans and spoke more quietly, but her words carried just as much weight. For 300 years we have followed your rules. We have limited our growth to make you comfortable. We have hidden our discoveries to avoid making you nervous. We have asked permission for everything like good children. She paused and looked around. The chamber making eye contact with representatives from dozens of species, but we are not children anymore. We do not need your permission to exist. We do not need your approval to grow. We do not need your oversight to thrive. The silence that followed was different from before. It was not the respectful quiet of a well-ordered meeting. It was the tense silence before a storm breaks. Juwan looked at her two companions and saw her own determination reflected in their faces. They had talked about this moment for months. They had prepared for it. They had hoped it would not come to this, but they were ready. We came here today hoping for partnership, she said, but you offer us chains. We came seeking cooperation, but you demand submission. We came as equals, but you treat us as subjects. She straightened her shoulders and spoke the words that would change everything. Humanity rejects your restrictions. Humanity rejects your oversight. Humanity rejects your authority over human affairs. Furthermore, humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council effective immediately. The chamber exploded in chaos. Beings that had not moved quickly in centuries leaped to their feet. Voices in dozens of languages created a wall of sound that seemed to shake the very wall. Species that had been allies for millennia turned to each other in shock and confusion. Some representatives seemed angry, others appeared frightened. A few looked curious, as if they were wondering what humanity knew that they did not. The Zentari floated in tight circles while the Morphins ran back and forth, chattering like excited children. The crystalline Thylex flickered between colors that had no names in human language. Through it all, Juwan gathered her papers with steady hands. Minho stood at attention like he was facing an enemy fleet. Heron smiled for the first time in months, as if a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Together, the three humans walked toward the massive doors. As they moved, other representatives fell silent, watching them go. Some reached out as if to stop them, others stepped back as if humanity carried some dangerous disease at the doorway. Juwan turned back for one last look at the chamber, where humanity had spent 3 centuries learning to bow the council that had ruled the galaxy since before humans left their caves. Now watched in stunned silence as their youngest members walked away. The doors closed behind them with the same deep rumbling sound, but this time it sounded different. This time it sounded like freedom. The news spread across human space faster than any ship could travel. Communication networks that had been quiet for decades suddenly burst with activity. Every human colony, every space station, every research outpost received the same message: humanity was free on the farming world of Kepler 442. Be colonist. Dongho stood in his agricultural dome, reading the announcement for the 3rd time. His hands shook as he held the datapad. His wife Sumin came running from the greenhouse when she heard him shouting. What is it? She asked, fear in her voice, thinking something terrible had happened. We are free, he said, his voice barely a whisper. We are finally free. For 15 years Dongho had filled out forms in triplicate just to plant new crops. The council required approval for every seed, every fertilizer, every expansion of the growing areas. When the harvest was poor, they told him to try harder. When it was good, they told him to slow down so other worlds would not feel bad. Suman took the datapad and read the message herself. Then she started laughing and crying at the same time. She ran to their storage shed and pulled out boxes of council forms, permits for planting, requests for equipment. applications for expansion plans that had been denied or delayed for years together. They carried the boxes outside and set them on fire. The flames rose high into the artificial atmosphere of the dome. Other colonists saw the smoke and came running. When they learned what was happening, they brought their own boxes of paperwork. Soon there was a bonfire that could be seen from orbit. We can finally build what we need, Dong Ho told the crowd that gathered. We can grow what we want. We can expand when we choose. We can live like humans instead of like prisoners. The celebration on Kepler 442b was happening on every human world. Miners on asteroid stations threw their safety restrictions into recycling units. Engineers on space platforms ignored council building codes for the first time in their lives. Scientists deleted council oversight protocols from their research computers in the Vega system. Engineer Young Jai was working on repairs to orbital station 7. When his communication system came alive, Dr. Nari was calling from her research vessel near Alpha Centauri. Her face appeared on his screen and she looked worried. The council has placed economic sanctions on us, she reported. They are cutting off all trade routes. No more shipments of rare metals, no more technology exchanges, no more access to council markets. Young just smiled, and it was not a friendly expression. Then we will build our own markets, we will find our own metals. We will make our own technology. But how? Nari asked. How can we survive without the council supply? Chen Xianjie was already calling up star charts on his computer screen. There are over 400 billion stars in this galaxy, he said. Most of them have never been explored by the council. They control maybe 1% of all the space out there. We have the other 99% to work with within days. Human ships were launching toward regions the council had marked as worthless or dangerous. The captains carried new orders that would have been impossible under council rule. Explore everything, trade with anyone, build wherever you can survive, Captain. Seojin commanded a convoy of 12 ships heading toward the galactic rim. His passengers were engineers, family scientists, and dreamers who wanted to see what lay beyond council space. They had volunteered for a journey that might take years and might end in empty space, with no way home. As his ships passed the last council checkpoint, the guards tried to stop them. Where are your travel permits? They demanded. Where are your destination approvals? Where are your cargo manifests? We do not need your permission anymore, Seojin replied. We are going to see what is out there. You can come with us or stay behind, but you cannot stop us. The council guards watched in shock as the human convoy passed by without slowing down. It was the first time in 10,000 years that anyone had ignored a council checkpoint. The guards did not know what to do. They had weapons, but no orders to use them against ships that were simply leaving behind Seojin. More convoys were forming every day, brought new groups of humans who wanted to explore the unknown. They packed their ships with supplies, tools, and dreams. The great exodus had begun on Earth. Captain Minjin stood before a crowd of 10,000 people in Seoul. They had gathered to hear about the opportunities that awaited them beyond council space. Behind him, a massive screen showed star charts with red dots marking human colonies and blue dots showing unexplored systems. The council thinks isolation will break us, he told the crowd. They think we will come crawling back begging for readmission. They forget what kind of species we are. The crowd cheered and Minjin waited for quiet before continuing. We are the species that crossed oceans in wooden boats when we did not know what lay beyond the horizon. We are the species that climbed mountains because they were there. We are the species that looked at the moon and decided to walk on it. We do not need permission to dream. More cheers filled the air, and Minjin raised his hand again. The council controls the center of the galaxy where everything is mapped and cataloged and regulated. But the edges of the galaxy are free. The spaces between the arms of the spiral are free. The regions beyond their sensors are free, and that is where we are going. The recruitment centers opened the next day, and the lines stretched for kilometers. Young people, old people, families, individuals, engineers, doctors, farmers, artists, all of them wanted to be part of something bigger than council regulations and restriction ship. After a ship launched from Earth and the other established human worlds, they carried everything humans would need to start over: tools and machines, seeds and livestock, computers and fabricators, books and music and art. They were not just leaving, they were transplanting human civilization to new ground. The council watched the exodus with growing alarm. Intelligence reports showed human ships Heading in all directions, some went toward the galactic core where ancient dangers supposedly waited. Others flew toward the rim where stars were young and planets were still forming. A few headed toward the dark spaces between galaxy arms where no council ship had ever traveled. Speaker Thylex called emergency sessions day after day, trying to understand what humans were planning. The other council species offered theories, but none of them made sense. Why would anyone choose to leave safety and civilization for unknown dangers? Why would anyone give up the protection of the council for the uncertainty of unexplored space? The answer would have terrified them if they had understood it. Humans were not fleeing from the council, they were running toward something better. They had spent 3 centuries learning the limits of council space. Now they wanted to discover what lay beyond those limits. Star Suyang was on one of the last ships to leave human space. She had stayed behind to help coordinate the evacuation, but now her work was done. Her ship, the New Horizon, carried 1,000 volunteers and enough equipment to build a research station anywhere they could find a stable orbit as the ship passed beyond the furthest council sensor array. Suyang felt something she had never experienced before in her 40 years of life: true freedom to explore without asking permission. Freedom to discover without filing reports, freedom to learn without council oversight telling her what questions she was allowed to ask. Behind them, the lights of council space grew dim. Ahead of them lay the vast darkness of the unknown galaxy, filled with possibilities that no council regulation could limit. The exodus was complete, and humanity was finally free to become whatever they chose to. Beatty Council waited for distress calls that never came. They waited for requests for help that never arrived. They waited for humans to realize their mistake and return home, but the only signals from human space were brief messages that said the same thing: we are fine, we are growing, we are free. 2 years had passed since the Great Exodus, and the silence from human space was becoming louder than any scream. The Council had expected chaos. They had expected desperate calls for help. They had expected humans to come crawling back within months, begging for readmission to the safety of civilized space. Instead, they got nothing at all. Intelligence Officer Taiwu sat alone in his monitoring station orbiting the dead colony of New Shanghai. The station was one of dozens the Council had left behind when humans abandoned their approved territories. His screen showed empty space where bustling human settlements had once thrived. He typed his daily report with growing unease. All human installations in Sector 7 remain abandoned. No signs of recent activity, no debris fields, no distress beacons. The evacuation appears to have been planned and executed with military precision. Nothing was left behind that could provide intelligence about their destination. The abandoned colonies were the most disturbing part of the whole situation. Humans had not fled in panic, leaving their belongings behind. Instead, they had carefully dismantled everything of value. Entire space stations had been taken apart piece by piece and loaded onto cargo ships. Power generators had been removed. Atmospheric processors had been packed up. Even the soil from greenhouse domes had been bagged and transported. Taiwu floated through the empty corridors of New Shanghai Station. The walls still held pictures of human families, but everything else was gone. It was like walking through a ghost ship. The silence was so complete he could hear his own heartbeat in his helmet. His communication system crackled to life. It was a message from Council. Intelligence Command Officer Taiwu, report to headquarters immediately. Priority Alpha. The trip back to the Council homeworld took 3 days. During the journey, Taiwu reviewed all the intelligence reports from the past 2 years. Every single human colony had been evacuated in the same methodical way. Every single human ship had disappeared beyond the range of Council sensors. Every single human settlement had gone dark on the same day. At Council headquarters, Taiwu was brought before a committee of intelligence chiefs from 12 different species. The chamber was smaller than the main council hall, but somehow felt more threatening. These were the beings who kept the galaxy safe by watching everyone and everything. Nothing happened in council space without their knowledge. Nothing except the complete disappearance of an entire species. Counselor Jiyun, a human who had chosen to remain loyal to the council, sat at the committee table. Her face was pale, and she avoided looking directly at Taiwu. She had been trying to track down her own people for 2 years with no success. Officer Taiwu, she said, her voice strained, what is your assessment of the human situation? Taiwu Stood at attention, they are gone, he said, simply not destroyed. Not captured, not hiding. They planned this evacuation for months, possibly years. Every colony, every station, every outpost was abandoned on schedule, with Maximum Efficiency Committee Chairman Vorthak, a massive creature with two many eyes, leaned forward. How many humans are we talking about? Taewoo consulted his datapad. Based on the last census, there were approximately 43 million humans living in council space, all gone, all evacuated to unknown locations. No trace of where they went. Impossible. Vorthak growled. 43 million beings do not simply vanish. You cannot hide that many people, that many ships, that much equipment with. Respect, Sir, Taewoo replied. Space is very large. The galaxy contains 400 billion star systems we monitor. Perhaps 50,000 of them. If humans wanted to disappear, they had plenty of places to go, Counselor. Juyun spoke again, her voice barely a whisper. What about their economic impact? Have we calculated the losses? The committee members shifted uncomfortably. It was clear this was not the first time the question had been asked. The answer was not pleasant. Taewoo pulled up another report. Human colonies provided 17% of our agricultural output. Their research divisions contributed to 40% of our technological advances. Their manufacturing stations produced 12% of our industrial goods. Their absence is causing supply shortages across council space. The room fell silent. Everyone had felt the impact. Fruit from human farms was no longer available in council markets. Medical advances from human research labs had stopped completely. Manufacturing delays were affecting everything from starship construction to household appliances, but the economic losses were nothing compared to the psychological impact. For 10,000 years, the council had maintained order through the certainty that they controlled everything in their territory. Species obeyed because resistance was impossible, rebellion was unthinkable. Now an entire species had simply walked away, and they had done it so quietly, so efficiently, that the council had not even realized what was happening until it was over. Dr. Minsu had left behind a resignation letter that was now being analyzed by council psychologists. The letter was simple and polite, but its implications were devastating to my colleagues in the council research division. She had written, I am resigning my position effective immediately. I'm joining my people in the outer regions, where we can pursue knowledge without restrictions. I leave behind my council citizenship and accept whatever consequences may follow. Thank you for the opportunity to serve. I hope someday you will understand that we were trying to be your partners, not your subjects. The letter had been found in her empty laboratory, along with detailed instructions for continuing her research projects. She had even left suggestions for improvements to council procedures, but she had taken all her personal research, all her private notes, all her breakthrough discoveries. Intelligence reports from across council space told the same story. Humans had been polite, professional, and thorough in their departure. They had fulfilled their existing contracts. They had completed their assigned projects. They had trained their replacements. But they had shared none of their advanced knowledge and taken all their innovations with them. The most disturbing part was how planned it all seemed. Shipping records showed that humans had been quietly moving personal belongings for months before the official Exodus communication logs revealed coded messages between human colonies that intelligence analysts still could not decode. They had been preparing to leave, while still smiling and working alongside their council colleagues. Every human scientist, engineer, farmer, and administrator had known this day was coming. None of them had said a word. Committee chairman Vorthak stood up, his massive frame casting shadows across the room. This changes nothing, he declared. The council has ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. One rebellious species cannot threaten our authority. But his words rang hollow in the silent chamber. The council had built their power on the belief that leaving was impossible, that survival outside their protection was unthinkable, that their ancient wisdom was irreplaceable. Now they faced the terrifying possibility that they had been wrong. Taewoo was dismissed with orders to continue monitoring human space, but everyone knew it was pointless. The humans were gone. The silence from their former territories was absolute. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, 43 million humans were building something new. The council chambers that had once echoed with confident voices now whispered with doubt. For the first time in millennia, the beings who ruled the galaxy wondered if their control was as absolute as they had always believed. In the depths of Space monitoring stations continued their watch for any sign of human activity, but the only signals they detected were the automated systems of abandoned colonies slowly shutting down one by one. The silence was complete, and it was growing louder every day. 3 years after the Great Silence began, disturbing reports started reaching the council chambers. Captain Junwoo had been a merchant trader for 30 years, traveling the established routes between council worlds, carrying cargo and passengers. He had never ventured beyond the mapped territories until desperation forced his hand. His ship, the Star Runner, had been carrying medical supplies to a plague-stricken world when pirates attacked in the neutral zone. Between losing his cargo and paying for repairs, Junwoo faced bankruptcy. The only way to make enough money was to try the dangerous trade routes beyond council space, where profits were higher and competition was non-existent. What he found in the Outer Rim changed everything. I was 3 weeks out from the last council beacon. Junwoo reported to a secret session of council intelligence. The coordinates showed empty space according to our charts. Nothing but dead systems and asteroid fields. But when I dropped out of hyperspace, I thought I was hallucinating. The holographic display in the chamber showed the images. Junwoo had recorded massive space installations built inside hollowed-out asteroids. Their surfaces gleamed with lights that could be seen from millions of kilometers away. Ships moved between them in patterns that looked like an intricate dance. These are human constructions. Junwoo continued, his voice shaking. I could not believe it at first. The energy signatures matched nothing in council databases. The architectural style was completely unknown, but when I got closer I saw the language markers: human writing, human symbols, human ship's intelligence. Chief Yorthek leaned forward in his chair. These installations, how large are they? Gunwoo swallowed hard. The main asteroid has been completely excavated. Its internal volume could house 10 million people. The power output readings suggest they have energy sources we do not understand. The manufacturing capacity appears to exceed anything in council space. The chamber erupted in whispered conversations. Species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia could not comprehend what they were seeing. How had humans built something so massive in just 3 years? How had they developed technology that surpassed council science? How had they remained completely hidden while doing it? Dr. Sun Yong, the human scientist who had remained loyal to the council, was brought in to analyze the data. Her face grew pale as she reviewed Junwoo's recordings. These energy signatures, she said, pointing to the displays, they suggest matter conversion technology. We theorized about this for decades, but never achieved a working model. She paused and pulled up comparison charts. The power levels they are generating would require either a small star or complete matter to energy conversion. If they have solved this problem, they have unlimited energy resources. Committee Chairman Vorthak slammed his appendage on the table. Impossible. No species achieves such advances. In 3 years, it took us millennia to develop our current technology. Dr. Sun Yong looked up from her analysis. With respect, sir, you developed your technology. Alone, humans have always worked differently. We share knowledge freely. We build on each other's discoveries. What might take one scientist decades to achieve can be accomplished by 1,000 scientists working together in months. The implications were staggering. The council had always maintained technological superiority by keeping their most advanced knowledge secret. Each species received only the technology they needed for their assigned roles. No one had access to the complete picture, but humans had taken all their knowledge with them when they left, and they had been free to combine it in ways the council had never allowed. Explorer King Min had been hired by the council to investigate rumors of human activity in the forbidden zones. These were regions of space the council had marked as too dangerous for exploration. Black holes, neutron stars, unstable stellar phenomena that could destroy ships. What Kyungmin found there defied every assumption about what was possible. They have built cities around black holes. He reported upon his return: space elevators that extend into the accretion disk, harvesting energy directly from matter falling into the gravitational well. The engineering is beyond anything we thought possible. His recordings showed structures that seemed to dance on the edge of destruction, massive rings surrounding black holes with ships moving along them at significant fractions of light speed. The humans had turned the most dangerous objects in the galaxy into power sources, but that was not the most shocking discovery. They are not alone. Out there, Kyungmin continued, I detected signals from species we have never encountered, ships using propulsion methods that do not appear in any Council database, beings that seem to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The chamber fell silent. This was the Council's greatest fear, that there were civilizations beyond their knowledge, beyond their control, beyond their understanding. The humans have made contact with these beings, Kingman said. They are trading with them, learning from them, sharing technology with them. The humans are part of something much larger than we realized. Dr. Sunyong stood up slowly, her face white with shock. You are saying that while we controlled our small portion of the galaxy, humans have been reaching out to the universe beyond? Exactly, Kyungmin replied. They have formed alliances with civilizations from other galaxies, other dimensions, other realities entirely. The humans we knew were just the beginning. Intelligence reports began flooding in from across the galaxy. Merchant ships reported seeing human vessels using impossible technologies. Scout ships detected human colonies and star systems that should have been uninhabitable. Diplomatic contacts whispered about humans who could communicate across galactic distances instantly. Each report was more disturbing than the last. Humans had not just survived their exodus from Council space. They had thrived, they had grown, they had evolved into something the Council could barely comprehend. Captain Jinwoo, a former Council security officer who had defected to join his people, sent a single message that reached intelligence networks across the galaxy. The message was brief, but its impact was enormous. We are not the same species that left your territories, he transmitted. We have learned things you cannot imagine. We have become things you would not recognize. We have grown beyond your ability to contain or control. The message included coordinates for a meeting point in neutral space. Any Council representative who wished to see what humanity had become was welcome to visit, but they would come as guests, not as authorities. The Council debate that followed lasted for days. Some members wanted to send a military expedition to investigate. Others argued for diplomatic contact. A few suggested that they should ignore the humans entirely and hope they would remain in the outer regions, but everyone knew that ignoring the problem would not make it disappear. The galaxy was changing in ways the Council could not control. Species that had been loyal for millennia were asking questions they had never asked before. If humans could leave and prosper, why could they not do the same? Trade routes that had been stable for centuries were being disrupted by independent merchants following human trade networks. Economic systems that had maintained order for millennia were failing as species began making their own agreements without Council oversight. The technological advances humans had achieved in 3 years would have taken the Council centuries to develop working alone. But the most terrifying realization was that humans were not working alone anymore. They had found allies, teachers, partners in civilizations the Council had never known existed. While the Council had focused on maintaining control over their small corner of the galaxy, humans had been reaching out to the infinite universe beyond. They had discovered that the galaxy was much larger, much more diverse, and much more wonderful than anyone had imagined, and they had invited others to join them in exploring it. The age of Council dominance was ending, not with war or revolution, but with something far more dangerous: the discovery that there were better ways to live than under the rule of ancient fears and restrictions in the outer darkness beyond Council censors. Millions of humans were building a new kind of civilization, one based on cooperation rather than control, on exploration rather than restriction, on partnership rather than dominance, and they were no longer alone. The galaxy was breaking apart, and the Council could no longer pretend otherwise. Species that had obeyed for thousands of years were openly defying orders. Entire civilizations were packing their ships and heading toward the outer rim, following the path humans had carved through. The darkness trade networks were collapsing as worlds chose to deal directly with human settlements rather than go through Council channels. On the manufacturing world of Zentari, prime workers had stopped producing goods for the Council warehouses. Instead, they were building ships of their own design, preparing for a journey to regions where they could work without regulations that had not changed in millennia. The Morphin colonies were in open rebellion, refusing to send tribute to the Council homeworld. Their message was simple and devastating: if the humans can survive without the Council, so can we. Speaker Thylex stood before the emergency session of the full Council, his crystalline form flickering with colors that showed his agitation. The great chamber that had once been filled with respectful silence now buzzed with angry arguments and desperate plans. Order. He commanded, but his voice no longer carried the absolute authority it once had. Order. In this chamber the representatives slowly quieted, but the tension remained. Species that had been allies for millennia now looked at each other with suspicion. Some supported military action against the humans, others argued for negotiation. A few were clearly preparing to join the exodus themselves. We face the greatest crisis in Council history, Thylex announced. The humans have poisoned the galaxy with their ideas of independence. Their rebellion spreads like a disease, threatening the very foundations of civilized space. Counselor Herr Young, a moderate voice from the Aldrin Collective, stood to speak. She was one of the few representatives who still believed in the possibility of peace. Honored speaker, she said, her voice steady. Perhaps we should consider that the humans were not wrong. Perhaps they were trying to tell us something we needed to hear. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. No one had ever suggested that the council might be wrong about anything in recorded history. The very idea was heretical. Thylex blazed with angry light. Counselor Herr Young, you forget yourself. The council has maintained peace and order for 10,000 years. Our wisdom has guided the galaxy through wars and disasters. Our authority has protected countless species from destruction. But at what cost? Herr Young replied, standing firm despite the hostile attention of the entire chamber. At the cost of growth, at the cost of discovery, at the cost of allowing species to reach their full potential. The humans were not our enemies, she continued. They were our partners, but we treated them like children. We told them what they could think, what they could discover, what they could become. And when they outgrew our limitations, we tried to force them back into chains. Thylex rose to his full height, his form casting rainbow patterns on the walls. Enough, the humans will return to council authority. Prepare the enforcement fleets. All military units will converge on human space. We will bring them back, even if we must drag them to the table. The order went out across the galaxy. The council fleet had not been assembled for war in over 1,000 years. They had relied on economic pressure and diplomatic isolation to maintain control, but now they faced a threat that could not be negotiated with or pressured into submission. Admiral Bolthern commanded the greatest military force the galaxy had ever seen. 700 ships from 40 different species, all converging on the coordinates where human activity had been detected. The fleet was so massive it took 3 days just to organize into formation, but as they traveled toward human space, disturbing reports continued to arrive. Captain Chanwu, commanding a human diplomatic vessel, had sent a message that was being broadcast across the galaxy on every communication frequency. People of the galaxy, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the static of interstellar space, you have lived under council rule for so long you have forgotten what freedom feels like. You have accepted limitations for so long you have forgotten how to dream. The Human Alliance invites any species that values growth over stagnation, exploration over fear, partnership over domination. We offer you a place at a table where every voice matters, where every species contributes according to their abilities and receives according to their needs. Come to the outer rim, come to the edge of the galaxy, come to the spaces between the stars where new civilizations are being born. Leave behind the fear and restrictions of the old order. Help us build something better than any of us could create alone. The message was accompanied by coordinates and safe passage guarantees. Any species that wanted to visit human territory would be welcomed as guests. The response was immediate and terrifying, for the council entire fleets began breaking away from the council armada. Ships that had been loyal for centuries suddenly changed course and headed for the coordinates Chanwu had provided. Some were explorers eager to see what humans had built. Others were refugees fleeing the increasingly desperate measures the council was taking to maintain control. Admiral Bolthern watched his great fleet dissolve as species after species chose humanity over the council. By the time they reached human space, only half the original force remained, and they were facing something none of them had expected. The humans were waiting for them. The star system the council had chosen to attack was not a helpless colony struggling to survive in hostile space. It was a thriving civilization that had transformed an entire region of the galaxy. Ships moved between dozens of worlds in perfect coordination. Space elevators connected planets to orbital habitats that gleamed like jewels against the star field. And, defending it all was a fleet unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships that seemed to bend space around them, vessels from alien civilizations that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, craft that used technologies the Council had never dreamed possible. Admiral Zhang Ho commanded the human defense fleet. His message to the approaching Council forces was broadcast on all frequencies. "Welcome to human space," he said, his voice calm and confident. "You are here as conquerors, but you will find no conquest. You are here as masters, but you will find no slaves. You may visit us as guests, you may join us as partners, you may learn from us as students, but you will not rule us as subjects." Those days are over. The battle that followed was not really a battle at all. It was a demonstration of what the galaxy could become when fear was replaced by cooperation, when restriction was replaced by innovation, when domination was replaced by partnership. The Council fleet found itself surrounded not by enemies but by possibilities. Ships that could have destroyed them instead offered help with repairs. Weapons that could have vaporized entire fleets instead projected holographic displays showing the wonders humans had discovered in the outer reaches. Species that had been enemies for millennia worked together in perfect harmony, defended by technologies that turned destruction into creation, aggression into cooperation, fear into wonder. Within hours, the great Council fleet was not attacking human space but exploring it. Crews that had come to conquer found themselves taking tours of human cities, learning about human discoveries, trading stories and knowledge with beings they had been sent to destroy. Admiral Bolthern stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching his officers work alongside human engineers to improve the ship's systems. He had commanded fleets for 40 years, but he had never seen anything like this. Peace achieved not through surrender, but through understanding. Captain Shanwu appeared on his communication screen, still calm, still confident. "Admiral Bolthern, we do not want your surrender, we want your freedom. Join us and help us build something better than either of us could create alone." The great Council fleet that had been sent to destroy human independence instead became the first wave of converts to the human cause. Ships that had carried weapons of war now carried families eager to start new lives in the outer Rimback and Council Space Speaker Thylex watched the reports with growing horror. His great military expedition had not only failed, it had joined the enemy. The humans had not conquered his fleet, they had liberated it. The galaxy was changing, and there was nothing the Council could do to stop it. The age of control was ending. The age of cooperation was beginning, and at the center of it all were the humans who had walked away from the table 3 years ago and built something so much better that even their enemies wanted to be part of it. The reckoning had come not as destruction but as transformation. The old order was dying not in fire but in the light of infinite possibility, and in the depths of space human ships continued their journey toward the edge of the galaxy, carrying with them anyone who was brave enough to dream of something better. The war lasted 6 months, but it was unlike any conflict the galaxy had ever seen. There were no burned worlds, no destroyed fleets, no refugee camps filled with the displaced. Instead, there was transformation on a scale that defied comprehension. Captain Sungwoo stood on the bridge of his ship, the frontier edge, watching the surrender ceremony of the Council fleet. Admiral Zareth, the ancient warrior, had commanded Council forces for over 2 centuries, but today he was laying down his weapons not in defeat, but in wonder. Admiral Zareth Sungwoo said, extending his hand, "We do not want your surrender, we want your freedom. Join us and help us build something neither of us could create alone." The alien admiral looked at the offered hand for a long moment. His species had evolved from predators who settled disputes through combat. The concept of victory without domination was difficult to understand, but the evidence was overwhelming. Humans had achieved something impossible. They had won a war by refusing to fight. "ID commanded this fleet to destroy your rebellion," Zareth said slowly, "but I find instead that you have shown us a new way to live. Your colonies thrive without oppression. Your people work together without coercion. Your civilization grows without conquest. How is this possible?" Sungwoo smiled. "It is possible because we stopped believing that someone must lose for someone else to win. We stopped believing that resources are limited when knowledge is shared. We stopped believing that control is necessary when cooperation is offered freely around them." The great transformation continued. Council ships were being retrofitted with human technology, not as spoils of war, but as gifts freely given human engineers worked alongside alien crews, teaching them about energy systems that turned matter into pure power, propulsion drives that folded space itself, communication arrays that could send messages across galactic distances instantly. But the real transformation was happening in the minds of beings who had lived under council rule for thousands of years. They were discovering what it felt like to make choices without asking permission, to explore without filing reports, to dream without limitations. Dr. Yejin stood before the emergency session of what remained of the Galactic Council. The great chamber was half empty as species after species had joined the human alliance. But those who remained were finally ready to listen. The table you tried to chain us to has been replaced, she announced, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space. We offer you seats at a new table where every voice matters, where every species contributes according to their abilities and receives according to their needs. Speaker Thylex's crystalline form, dim with exhaustion, spoke for the first time in weeks. What assurance do we have that this new order will not become another tyranny? What prevents humans from becoming the new rulers of the galaxy? Jin smiled gently. The same thing that prevented us from accepting your tyranny, the belief that no one species has the right to rule another. The conviction that the galaxy is big enough for everyone to find their own paths. She gestured to the holographic displays, showing the expanding human alliance, dozens of species working together not under human rule but as equal partners, each contributing their unique strengths, each learning from the others, each growing in ways that would have been impossible under the old restrictions. We do not seek to replace the Council, she continued. We seek to make it irrelevant. We offer something better than authority. Partnership rather than domination, cooperation rather than control, freedom rather than security. The transformation spread across the galaxy like dawn breaking over a new world. Trade networks that had been rigid for millennia became fluid and dynamic. Species that had been locked into assigned roles discovered they had talents the Council had never allowed them to develop on the former manufacturing world of Zentari Prime. Workers who had spent centuries making the same products over and over were now designing ships that could cross between dimensions. Artists who had been forced to create only approved cultural works were painting murals that captured the dreams of entire species. The Morphin colonies that had rebelled against Council tribute were now sending ships to explore the galactic core regions that had been forbidden. For 10,000 years, their discoveries were changing everything anyone had believed about the galaxy. Ancient ruins that predated the Council were found on dozens of worlds, evidence of civilizations that had existed long before the current galactic order, technological artifacts that suggested the galaxy had once been home to beings of incredible advancement. The humans had been right. The galaxy was much older, much more diverse, and much more wonderful than the Council had ever admitted. There were layers of history that had been ignored, mysteries that had been forbidden, truths that had been hidden. Darjayan led the expedition that made the most startling discovery of all in the galactic core where Council ships had never traveled. They found a vast library left behind by the galaxy's first civilization. The archives contained the complete history of galactic development, and the records showed something incredible. The Council had not been the first galactic government. There had been others before them. Each had risen to power, promising order and security. Each had eventually become rigid and controlling. Each had eventually fallen when their subjects discovered that freedom was possible. The pattern had repeated itself across millions of years, ancient species rising to rule the galaxy, younger species eventually rebelling and creating something new. The cycle of control and liberation was as old as the galaxy itself, but the humans had broken the pattern. Instead of replacing the Council with another version of the same system, they had created something entirely different, a network of cooperation rather than a hierarchy of control. A galaxy where no one ruled because everyone was free. Elder Byung-ho sat in his garden on New Earth, one of hundreds of human worlds scattered across the outer rim. His grandchildren gathered around him as he told them the story of how their species had walked away from the Council table. They thought abandoning their table would destroy us, he said with a smile that held decades of satisfaction. They never understood that we were builders. We did not need their table. We could build our own and make it big enough for everyone. The children listened with wide eyes as their grandfather described the galaxy that had existed before the Great Exodus, a place where permissions were required for everything, where species were limited by the